In an age when sails were the only hope and sea charts the only law, the greatest fear for any sailor was not a cannon or a cutlass, but the icy hand of thirst. It came slowly, insidiously, starting with a feeling of dryness in the throat, turning into a searing pain. Aboard the pirate ship Phantom Odyssey, chaos reigned. The captain, a ruthless pirate named Captain Root, desperately scanned the endless ocean. This was his first command after a betrayal, and it seemed the heavens had decided to test his mettle. The voyage had stretched on for months. Fresh water supplies were exhausted, and the nearest land was just a faint dream on the horizon. One by one, the crew began to go mad. Their lips were cracked, their eyes sunken, and hallucinations became their new reality. Some tried to drink the salty water, hoping for a miracle, but it only hastened their death. Captain Root, known for his ruthlessness, was losing his authority before their very eyes. He felt his crew falling apart, and with it, his leadership. His soul was wounded by what he saw, strong men becoming powerless, their valor dissolving into despair. He himself felt the fire of thirst consuming him from within. One day, when the sun was particularly merciless, the youngest crew member, a cabin boy named Lucas, approached the captain, holding a broken glass flask he had found in a hiding place. It belonged to his father, who had been a scholar. "Captain, my father said that even salty water has a soul. You just have to find a way to set it free." These words, simple and naive, struck like a bolt of lightning. Root, who had always believed only in force and his own cunning, suddenly saw a light. Instead of searching for land, he decided to search for knowledge. He closed his eyes, remembering everything he had heard about ancient alchemists and their attempts to transform one thing into another. He recalled a principle called distillation, but no one had ever used it on such a scale. It was at this moment that Root ceased to be just a pirate. He became a seeker of truth, ready to challenge nature itself. After that terrible voyage, Captain Root was changed forever. The Phantom Odyssey was repaired, and its crew was filled with new members, but they were not typical pirates. Root was not looking for brawn and combat experience, but for intelligence and ingenuity. He gathered all those who were considered eccentrics and outcasts. A former apothecary who conducted strange experiments with herbs, an old master blacksmith who could forge anything but weapons, and even an astronomer who believed that the secrets of the universe could also be found in earthly elements. Among them was Lucas, the surviving cabin boy who became his loyal assistant. The new ship, named the Sea Cage, was unlike any other vessel. Its sides were painted black, and on the deck, instead of the usual boxes of cannonballs, stood strange copper vessels. Root had turned his cabin into a real laboratory, where the walls were covered with schematics, and the floor was cluttered with flasks and tubes. He and his crew, whom he called the alchemists of the sea depths, worked tirelessly, trying to find a way to purify water without a large amount of fuel, which was the biggest problem. They understood that to boil as much water as the crew needed, an entire forest would be required. Root conducted experiments, trying to find an effective method. He noticed that if the water was heated very slowly, the vapor that came out contained fewer salts. But how to achieve such a low temperature? The answer came unexpectedly during a storm. As the wind whipped the waves, they noticed that the water that landed on the hot deck evaporated and settled on the walls, leaving behind salt crystals. This gave Root an idea: constant but not too intense heating. He ordered a special stove to be forged that ran on dry peat and smoldered like a coal, without an open flame. This allowed for a constant, uniform temperature. The first part of the invention, called the beginning pipe, was ready. Now came the hardest part: how to collect the vapor and purify it from the salt residue that still rose with the steam. Many challenges still lay ahead. Although Root and his crew had found a way to obtain sweet steam, as he called it, It still contained microscopic salt particles. He understood that the vapor, before becoming water, had to go through another stage of purification. Thus, the idea of the labyrinth of separation was born. It was a complex system of copper tubes arranged in a spiral. It was designed so that the vapor, passing through it, would gradually cool, and the salt and mineral residue would settle on the inner walls before turning into water. It was like a maze for molecules, where only the purest could reach the end. The blacksmith alchemist, skillfully bending the copper, created this incredible structure, which became the heart of the entire system. But the most difficult task was cooling. For the vapor to condense, it needed quick and effective cooling, and there was no ice in the tropics. One day, Lucas, watching the sea waves break against the ship, noticed that the water that landed on the deck was cooler than the air. "Captain," he exclaimed, "the sea can cool itself." It was a brilliant yet simple idea. Root and his crew invented a primitive but effective pump that was powered by the sails and wind. It continuously supplied cool seawater from beneath the ship's hull into a special barrel placed around the copper labyrinth. This allowed for the tubes to maintain a low temperature, forcing the vapor to condense and turn into pure, transparent drops. When all the parts were connected, Captain Root named his setup the Heart of the Ocean. It was cumbersome, complex, and required constant maintenance, but it worked. The first drops of fresh water that fell into the barrel were, according to witnesses, the most precious loot pirates had ever seen. It tasted like the first rain on a coral reef. They no longer depended on land. The fame of the sea cage and its elusive captain spread faster than a storm wind. Other pirates, who had once scorned Root and his philosophers, now envied his advantage. They couldn't understand how the sea cage could sail the ocean for weeks without docking to replenish water supplies. Their ships, forced to seek out fresh water sources, became easy targets for naval fleets. Root's ship, on the other hand, could take any route, ignoring ports and colonial settlements. This gave him not only freedom of movement, but also an incredible tactical advantage. He appeared where he was not expected, attacked merchant ships that thought they were safe far from shore, and disappeared as quickly as he appeared. The British fleet that pursued him could not understand how he managed it. They thought he was using secret routes known only to local natives, or had secret bases that no one knew about. But the truth was simpler, and at the same time incredible. His base was with him. The Heart of the Ocean worked constantly, providing the crew with all the water they needed and allowed them to be truly independent. The crew of the sea cage was devoted to their captain. They knew that his invention had saved them from a fate worse than death, and were ready to fight for it to the very end. They were not ordinary pirates. They were scholars who, with the help of science, had conquered the ocean. They never attacked ships unless necessary, only when they needed fuel for the stove. They were not bandits, but true explorers who had learned the deepest secret of the sea. Their ship became a symbol of freedom, and their legend lived on, through whispers and tales in taverns, where they spoke of alchemists who drink the tears of the sea. Of course, not everyone was happy with Root's success. Other pirates, blinded by greed, began to hunt not for gold, but for his ship and its secret. They wanted to capture the Heart of the Ocean and gain the same advantage. Root's fiercest enemy was his former brother-in-arms, a captain known as Iron Skeleton, who ruled a pirate fleet. He was ruthless and cruel, and he could not accept that some bookworm had become more successful than him. Iron Skeleton set a trap, luring the sea cage to an island that supposedly had a rich source of coal, which was vital for the Heart of the Ocean. Root, though cautious, fell for the trick, for he knew that without fuel, his invention would cease to work. When they approached the island, Iron Skeleton's fleet appeared from behind the rocks, encircling the sea cage. The battle was uneven. Root's ship was fast, but it did not have the firepower of the large pirate galleons. The crew fought desperately, but the odds were not in their favor. In the heat of the battle, Iron Skeleton, wanting to humiliate Root, fired at the heart of the ocean. The copper tubes shattered, and salty water mixed with the crew's blood. Root, seeing that his invention was destroyed, knew the battle was lost. He gathered his remaining crew and ordered them to abandon the ship in small boats. He remained alone, standing by the broken heart of the ocean, watching its copper parts sink into the sea. Iron Skeleton, approaching, laughed scornfully. "Your miracle turned out to be as fragile as your dreams, bookworm." Root just smiled in response. "You can break my body, but you cannot take my knowledge. Our souls will be free, and yours will be forever chained to thirst." With those words, he lit the fuse to the gunpowder magazine, and the sea cage exploded, taking Iron Skeleton and his ship with it. Of course, not everyone was happy with Root's success. Other pirates, blinded by greed, began to hunt not for gold, but for his ship and its secret. They wanted to capture the heart of the ocean and gain the same advantage. Root's fiercest enemy was his former brother-in-arms, a captain known as Iron Skeleton, who ruled a pirate fleet. He was ruthless and cruel, and he could not accept that some bookworm had become more successful than him. Iron Skeleton set a trap, luring the sea cage to an island that supposedly had a rich source of coal, which was vital for the heart of the ocean. Root, though cautious, fell for the trick, for he knew that without fuel, his invention would cease to work. When they approached the island, Iron Skeleton's fleet appeared from behind the rocks, encircling the sea cage. The battle was uneven. Root's ship was fast, but it did not have the firepower of the large pirate galleons. The crew fought desperately, but the odds were not in their favor. In the heat of the battle, Iron Skeleton, wanting to humiliate Root, fired at the heart of the ocean. The copper tubes shattered, and salty water mixed with the crew's blood. Root, seeing that his invention was destroyed, knew the battle was lost. He gathered his remaining crew and ordered them to abandon the ship in small boats. He remained alone, standing by the broken heart of the ocean, watching its copper parts sink into the sea. Iron Skeleton, approaching, laughed scornfully. "Your miracle turned out to be as fragile as your dreams, bookworm." Root just smiled in response. "You can break my body, but you cannot take my knowledge. Our souls will be free, and yours will be forever chained to thirst." With those words, he lit the fuse to the gunpowder magazine, and the sea cage exploded, taking Iron Skeleton and his ship with it. Although the sea cage perished, and its secret went to the bottom with its creator, the legend of Captain Root and his invention remained. Those who survived spread it in every port, in every tavern. They told of a captain who did not seek gold, but freedom from the simplest, yet most terrible need. They spoke of the heart of the ocean, which turned salt into life and despair into hope. Some claim to have seen parts of the heart of the ocean on various islands, hidden like true treasures, so that no one could ever assemble them again. Over time, the legend dissolved into a multitude of others, but its essence remained. It reminded sailors that knowledge and ingenuity can be more powerful than any weapon. It inspired people to seek not only treasures, but also the secrets of nature that can change lives. And today, when fishermen go out to sea, they sometimes remember Captain Root and his heart of the ocean. They believe that in the deepest parts of the sea, where the sun does not penetrate, Root's soul still drifts, guarding the secret that allowed him and his crew to be truly free, and that those who seek knowledge, and not just wealth, may one day find this secret, buried in the sands of time.